Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. And thank you, Steve Rempelos and the Rodeo Band. I'd like to take this occasion to welcome you to the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame. As you know, the only heritage center in the world devoted exclusively to the sport of professional rodeo. I'm Mike Husband. I'm executive director of the Hall. This is a very, very proud day for the Hall of Fame. It's a great moment for rodeo, and for those 7 rodeo greats here today, who will join 120 other rodeo legends in this hall, we hope that this is one of your finest hours, not only for you, but for your family and your friends as well. We welcome you here, we honor you, we salute you. This is a proud moment in rodeo history. I would like to remind you that immediately following the ceremonies today, we'll be having a barbecue lunch in the big tent over here, courtesy of our good friends at Coors. In just a moment, the Pikes Peak Range Rider Pivots will present the colors. I'd like to ask you to please remain standing following the presentation of the colors for the national anthem, which will be sung by Gary Lipich of the PRCA staff, and the Canadian anthem, which will be sung by Donna Vold Larson. Following the anthems, Mike Spencer of the Fellowship of Christian Cowboys will give the invocation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pikes Peak Range Rider Pivots. Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Donna Vold Larson will sing the Canadian anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in our son's command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for for thee.
Let us pray. Father God, we praise you for being our personal Lord and Savior and allowing us to do something that we love so much. We pause this morning to remember two Hall of Famers who passed this past month, Hugh Bennett and Don McLaughlin. We ask you to comfort their family and friends at this time. Bless these men and their families who we will honor today, and we thank you for their talents that have enabled them to leave their mark in the rodeo business, and that these achievements may live on as an inspiration to many for years to come. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. Thank you.
Please be seated. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to introduce to you the man who in the past few years has brought this sport to new heights. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commissioner of Professional Rodeo, Lewis Cryer. Commissioner.
Thank you, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association and the Board of Trustees of the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame and Museum of the American Cowboy, I welcome you to this Hall of Fame induction ceremony for 1994. For some of you, you've come a long ways to be here, and for our inductees, they've probably gone the road harder and longer than all of us put together, and that's why they are here today. Last night, we had a very special dinner, and that was for the inductees and their families and very, very important people that they invited to the function. It was a special evening for us as the staff and those who represent the Hall of Fame and the PRCA to be a part of that experience, as a few tears were shed, some warm embraces were taken by all there, and a genuine outpouring of love, of understanding, friendship, and family was expressed during the dinner portion of our meeting last night. Today, we are here to honor these inductees, not only for their individual accomplishments in the arena of competition, but for what they have done for the sport in all the years that they have participated. There's a group of individuals that I would like to acknowledge first before we start talking about the inductees themselves and actually proceeding through the ceremony. And that is a group of ladies that without their support, without their dedication, and without their love, the inductees would probably not be here today. And so I want to take this opportunity to honor and recognize Dorothy Burke, Cheryl Burke, Debbie Henson, Dorothy Henson, Donita Barnes, Karen Vold, Martha Ross, Marilee Montana, Margot Trujillo, and Stella Trujillo, the mother and wives of our inductees. We thank you for sharing these gentlemen with us, and we honor you also today. Thank you. Well, I'd saved this train for you, but they got here a little early. Because when we had Mel Lambert inducted up here, we made sure the train came through, and it didn't bother Mel a bit. He just kept right on going, handled the crowd, and entertained the crowd on that particular day. A couple of years ago, when we first started the induction ceremonies on this Saturday morning of the Pikes Peak Bus Rodeo, we also determined it was time to recognize a group of individuals and a very important segment of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, and that is the Rodeo Committee. As you all realize, for those who have competed in the arena or been part of that ceremony and part of the festival of the sport of rodeo, that this could not happen without the Rodeo Committee. And so consequently, with that thought in mind, we decided it was important during these ceremonies on an annual basis to recognize one of the rodeo committees within the 800 that represent the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association and the CPRA in Canada. And so today it is our pleasure to bring special recognition to the Calgary Stampede of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And at this time I would like to ask Dan Capathorne, the president of the Calgary Stampede, please come forward. As you will recognize, and as we have been through these ceremonies before, there were the 4 great outdoor rodeos that everyone has recognized as the 4 outdoor rodeos in the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, and they've been honored prior to Calgary today, that being Salinas, Pendleton, and Cheyenne, and today we honor the Calgary Stampede. I had the pleasure of going to Calgary this year and presenting to Dan in front of 10,000 persons at the Stampede grounds this plaque symbolic of this induction ceremony today. And I know how proud they were on that day to receive it, and that's why they're here again today to take this special honor. So on behalf of the PRCA and the Hall of Fame, I would like to present and recognize the Calgary Stampede of Calgary, Alberta, Canada for their pioneering efforts and the continuing support of the sport of professional rodeo presented on this August 13th, 1994. Ladies and gentlemen, the Calgary Stampede. Yes, brother. You need to get right up.
Right up on top. Thank you, Commissioner. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. First of all, let me say thank you to the Rodeo Hall of Fame for this honor today. And I want to congratulate all of the honorees for their induction here today. If I may quote, "It will be the biggest Frontier Day show the world has ever seen. Hundreds of cowboys and cowgirls, thousands of Indians. We'll have Mexican ropers and riders. We'll make Buffalo Bill's Wild West extravaganza look like a road show." Those were the words used by Guy Wiedeck, an American, a dreamer, an organizer extraordinaire, when describing his dream back in 1912 to convince the financial ailing Calgary exhibition that a stampede, or if you will, a rodeo, should be held. The exhibition had been in existence since 1886. He went on with his dream, and he raised $100,000 that year to pursue his dream of the Calgary Stampede. No small feat back in 1912. Some 82 years later, we are still going strong. It has been said that rodeo, to some, is a sport, to others, a business, but to most, it's a way of life. Today, it's a way of life which flourishes throughout North America because of such dreamers as Guy Wiedeck of this world. Rodeos has evolved from its early days, when it was considered nothing more than a circus, to a very organized and professional sport. This was never more evident than in 1988, when the sport of rodeo was showcased at the Winter Olympics in Calgary with the participation of Team USA and Team Canada. We at the Stampede are very proud of our association with the PRCA and the CRCA, two organizations who have governed the sport of rodeo in North America over the years without political interference and have brought the sport to world-class recognition. I'm very pleased and humbled to accept this honor on behalf of those who have gone before me, our rodeo committee of some 20-plus members, and the rest of our 300 staff and 1,700 volunteers who continue annually to produce the greatest outdoor show on earth. Thank you again.
Now we begin with the inductions. We have a variety of state queens and Miss Rodeo America here, which we thank very much for their help with the hospitality this morning. They will be ushering our presenters and our speakers and recipients to the dais for presentation. The first presentation will be for Gene Ross Steer Wrestling. To make the introduction remarks, Mr. Bruce Ross. Mr. Ross, please. There has to be a first one, you know? I mean,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
This is not a sad day, even though Gene is not here as part of the ceremony. He told me not too long before he passed on, he said, I've had it all. He said, I've had a full life. He said, I was a 3 times world champion cowboy. He said, I've had the best wife in the world of over 50 years, wonderful sons and grandchildren. And he said, and to top it all off, I had the best horse in the world and the best dog. And here representing Gene today is a part of the Ross family, his wife of over 50 years, Martha, son Gary, and his wife Scotty, Brian, his girlfriend Gary, his girlfriend Holly, I'm sorry, and my wife and his beloved daughter-in-law Pat. Gene Ross, 3 times world champion steer wrestler, 1929, 1931, and 1937. Inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City in 1988. Inducted into the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame today. Born in 1904, died in 1988, span of 84 years, and I'll try to cover just a little bit of it in a few minutes. The seeds that him and many of the other old cowboys that they planted, a lot of them that were also have been inducted here, is what you see the flowers of out here today, the young cowboys. It seemed like each generation of young cowboys try to emulate the champions of the last, and I think they must have done a pretty good job because we've got some real class champions and cowboys out there today. He was born in Indian Territory in 1904, what later became Oklahoma. Sayre. He grew up on a farm with 7 brothers and 3 sisters. There wasn't much schooling in those days. He went to the 8th grade. That was the end of it, which left him with a lot of time on his hands at a pretty young age. And there wasn't a whole lot of activities there, so he started participating in small local rodeos. And he was good at it, excelled in it, and started playing the larger shows. And those were tough times. Stock market crash at 29, depression areas, and they had to really want to be a cowboy in those days. They had to love the sport because there wasn't a whole lot of money in it, and he did. He stayed with it, and he was supported by a good wife. On the way up, Mom was telling me about in Butte, Montana, back in the 30s, old cars then didn't have heaters in them, and clutches and stuff were bad, and they started up a mountain and the clutch went out or was going out, so she had to unload the horse and walk the horse up the mountain where he could make it to the top. So they really wanted a cowboy in those days. They traveled all over the United States and Canada in old vehicles and pulling horse trailers, schlepping horse trailers, tents. She told another tale of them breaking a steer at a rodeo, so they didn't want to let anything waste. They all butchered those steer and had them a big feed out on the rodeo grounds. And there's lots of other stories. There could be a book of it, and I don't want to hold you for a long time, but as I mentioned, they set a lot of precedents, and some of the things that I learned from him, and hopefully my boys, and I see it in the young cowboys today, is honesty, hard work, I don't know how many times I heard if you shake a man's hand and you tell him something, that's your word, that's a contract, and do it. And it sunk in. And they had a sense of humor. Not too long before he passed on, he said, well, son, he said, if I'd had any idea I was going to live this long, I'd have took a whole lot better care of myself. And he went on to be a successful trucking contractor in south of Houston at Freeport, Texas, and we spent about 25 years there, and that's where he passed away. And with that introduction, I'll give you the legacy of Gene Ross, husband, dad, grandpa, and cowboy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. The plaque shall read, Gene Ross, steer wrestler. Gene Ross was known as a good bronc rider and calf roper, but he excelled in steer wrestling, taking the event championship the first year of official championships were awarded. He started his career at 1922 in Comanche, Oklahoma Rodeo, and went on to become a familiar sight at Boston Gardens, Madison Square Garden, Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles. In 1934, he was part of the Tex Austin troupe, which sailed to England to perform for King Edward VIII. His horse Chico, recalled by some as one of the best steer wrestling mounts of the era, traveled with the troupe. Ross retired from competition in the early 1940s. When asked what he thought of present-day rodeo, he said, "My gripe is they won't allow the old-timers to go behind the chutes to see a good horse. I sure like to look at a good horse." Born Sayre, Oklahoma, January 23, 1904. He died February 16, 1988. World champion steer wrestler, 1929, 1931, and 1937. Gene Ross, steer wrestler. To respond and receive the plaque, Mrs. Gene Ross.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
In behalf of my late husband, Gene Ross, myself, and my immediate family, who are all here with me, and many, many cousins, aunts, uncles, who are all very, very proud of their famous ancestor. I wish to thank everyone for this honor.
The next inductee, Monty Montana, contract.
Nice to be here.
You're not going to read that whole book, are you?
Yeah, I'm going to read this whole book.
I thought you might.
And all these pages here. The last request by Monty Montana was that please make it brief.
Thank you, Monty.
You know, when we think back many, many years, I'm sure all of you have heard of the Sundance Kid. The Sundance Kid, a notorious outlaw. We're not going to induct him here today, I'll guarantee you that. The Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. They were so remote from many of our lives that these two gentlemen are something that we look upon as fairy tales or something that happened long before the world. But if you can imagine the span of time, the great distance of time that this performer that I'm here to present has lived through. He was 11 years old when Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, those notorious outlaws, were shot during one of their notorious holdups. Now that goes back a long, long time. Monty, as a lad, traveled, if you can imagine, from Wolf Point, Montana to McLaughlin, South Dakota in a covered wagon. Actually, in a real, genuine covered wagon. How many people do we know that traveled in a covered wagon? And all along the way, he and his dad and his mother, Owen Mickle, his father, his mother Edna, performed their feats of whip cracking, trick roping along the way, and Monty was right there with them. They returned later in life to Wolf Point, Montana, where the family settled, and Monty used to go down when he was just a lad in his early teens. He trick roped for the trains coming in, and they'd throw the money up on the platform, and he became one of the richest guys in Wolf Point. He made about $6 every month. I'll tell you, it was a sight to see. I didn't get to see it at that time, but I wish I could have taken all of you with me so you could have seen it. His dad said, we're going to get out of this covered wagon. He said, I just bought a Model T Ford. He said, you know that thing will do 2 miles in 1 minute, 30 miles an hour? He said, boy, we're going places now. And they went places, I'll tell you. That old Model T took them to the shows all over the country. Now, Owen Mickle, Monty's dad, was a kind of an enterprising horse trading sort of a guy. And he went up on the hillside at Wolf Point one day and found a spring up there. It was so putrid you couldn't get within 100 feet of the darn thing. It smelled bad. Had a terrible smell coming from it. But a lot of those old people who were a little ill used to go up there and take a little sip of this water. Well, Monty's dad, Owen, decided, hey, I can get rich bottling this stuff and sell it for $1 a bottle. And they called it Mickle's Miracle Mineral Water. 3M. They were the first 3M company in the world. Old boy came up to him one day and he said, Owen, he said, I'd like to have a bottle of that stuff you've brewed up. I hear it's pretty good. He said, well, it is. It works good. He said, I've had a lot of good comment on it. He said, it'll be $1 for this bottle. And he handed him the bottle, and the old boy said, well, he said, how much of that stuff do I take? Just how much of a dose do I need? Well, Owen, he said, well, it all depends on how far your bedroll is from the privy. He said, well, it's about 90 feet. He said, well, then I'd take 3 good, big, healthy gulps of it. A couple of days later, he met him again. He said, say, by the way, he said, how did that Mickle Miracle Water work? It's worked awful good, he said, but you missed it by about 30 feet. I first saw Monty. It's around 1930, maybe 31. I was born and raised on an Indian reservation, and my dad took me and my brothers to a rodeo at the Territorial Days in Oregon City. Lo and behold, there was Monty Montana, a young man of about 21 years old. He was one of the stars of the show, and along with him was Buff Brady Sr., Everett Bowman, Tilly Bowman, Lorena Trickey. I had never seen such a group of great people in all of my life. There goes that doggone train again.
Oh, yeah.
He mentioned that I went right on entertaining while the train went by. I think the entertainment that I gave was T.J. Walter here. He said, yeah, I'm here. And I said, that train leaves at 6 o'clock in the morning, be under it. I'm just joking, T.J. I knew T.J. as a young lad. He was a wild little cowboy, I'll tell you. Later on in life, Monty married and raised a wonderful family. Linda, Monty Jr. Monty Jr. is here today. I suppose Monty will tell you about him. And I used to watch him as a young cowboy in rodeo. They'd ride into the arena, got in stair steps, Monty and the family. Well, I used to admire them greatly. And they were called the Monty Montana Troop. And along the way, they picked up trick riders and trick ropers. I can remember many of them that used to work and ride with them and rope with them. And they soon became great stars on their own, and they would drop away from the Monty Montana Troop. And today, many of those that rode in the Monty, Montana troupe are well known as great trick riders and trick ropers, and I remember many of them. Motion pictures. Early in life, Monty became a leading man. He had a series, and he even had a leading lady. And he had a kind of a brief motion picture career. And he was looked upon by all of those old-time motion picture cowboys as one of them. And they all loved him. Later on in life, he worked for an outfit called Weber's Bakery. They thought that he was one of the best people they ever had to publicize their bakery goods. And in that period of time, Monty traveled to schools all over the United States. And Monty can tell you how many millions, they have estimated, how many millions of kids have gone to see Monty at schools. And oftentimes I've seen old gray-haired people come up and say, "Monty, Montana, it's good to see you. You came to my school when I was 6 years old." I used to love to watch Monty in his horse catches, his trick roping. He'd ride out, introduce him. He'd ride into that arena with that big loop, rear old Rex into the air, tip his hat, and a smile that was wide as this canyon. Then he'd go into his horse catches. What beautiful horse catches they were. I don't think anyone has ever duplicated those horse catches. One of them that I used to like greatly was the somersault catch. He'd jump through the loop, a big Texas loop, and he'd jump back and forth through this loop and do a reverse skip through the loop. On the right time, he'd holler, "Ho!" and down the track he'd come. He'd turn a big somersault and rope that horse by the front feet, and up he'd step, horse and rope in one hand, his hat in the other with a big grin, and I'll tell you what, a sight to see, Monty and his horse catches. He usually wound up his act with a big Texas skip, but not before he had performed his big horse catch. Now, I've seen him put as many as 10, 11 horses on the track, and this was the difficulty in getting all of these horses to run together. Hard to find 10 horses that he could pick 10 of them up with the front feet, just about do it every time. But the difficulty of getting 10 horses to run together limited his catches to about 6. You could usually find 6 people who could run together. Monty would shake that loop out. Slim Pickens, the great rodeo clown, and other great clowns would go out there and they'd help Monty lay his rope out. I'll never forget how old Slim used to go out there. What a guy. He'd lay the rope all out. He'd pick little pieces of lint off of that rope. He'd lay it all out good, and he'd say, "Oh, everything's okay, Monty." Monty had his horses down the end of the track, and he'd holler, "Come on." And then he'd make a few runs toward the track where they were coming, have that big loop shook out behind him. Standing in the middle of it was Slim Pickens. And when he shook that loop out, Slim would do a big pratfall. You never saw anything like it. Monty's hat would come off and the big trick was gone. Well, he'd regroup and tell Slim to get back out of the way, and he'd do that catch again. It was a beauty. If you never saw it, you missed one of the greatest horse catches of all time. I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. I just wish I could have taken all of you with me as we watch Monty, Montana in action. In Monty's home are many memorabilia pieces, including artwork from the famous cowboy artists of America, old-time cowboy artists. His home is full of these artifacts, and they are beautiful. He's performed before kings, queens, presidents. Monty will never forget the time at the inaugural parade in Washington, D.C. when he rode up before President Eisenhower. Said, "Mr. Eisenhower, can I rope you?" He said, "Go ahead, Monty." Monty shook his loop out, roped the president. 16 FBI men surrounded him. Dwight Eisenhower said, "That's all right, gentlemen, let him go. He's my friend." His famous rope has roped kings, queens, presidents, little guys, little cowboys, little girls along the way. No man in rodeo has had such a career. He's ageless. Ageless, think of the word. Ageless is the beauty of a happy heart. Monty, Montana.
The plaque shall read, Monty, Montana, contract personnel. Monty Montana, his first trick roping performance was at 1925 in Miles City, Montana Rodeo. Claims each performance since has been just as exciting to him as that first one. At 17, he hired out with the Buck Jones Show trick roping and riding and training horses. Arena announcers had difficulty with his name, Owen Harlan Mickle, as usually introduced him as Monty from Montana. In 1929, he adopted the name and has since used it. Montana joined the professional ranks in 1938, and since then has starred in every major arena in the United States, Mexico, and Canada, as well as many other countries. Montana's trademark has been a black and white pinto horse, every one of them named Rex. He and the Rexes have ridden in every Rose Bowl parade since 1932. Montana says he has been more fortunate than most performers. His trick roping, along with his horses, have been his business as well as his hobby. Born near West Point, Montana, June 21, 1910. Monty, Montana, contract personnel.
Thank you, okay.
Thank you. Well, this is really an honor, and Mel, you unloaded the whole load. Thank you very much. One of my closest and best friends, Mel Lambert, who has been a long-time friend, and we've been through a lot, and I thank you for coming. And there's a lot of other people here from Oregon, Pendleton, Bill Shaw, and all of his troop, and everybody here. I want to thank you all for coming here. This is really an honor. You folks realize how many times I've jumped through this lousy rope to be able to be here today. You may think I'm dressed a little bit fancy today. Well, you know, the horses and the cows are getting more particular nowadays. And when I started in the show business, a feller told me, he said, "Kid, if you don't have any talent, wear a loud outfit and ride a fast horse." So that's what I did. And another thing that I learned while I was performing, you know, I was never a world champion, but I worked with a lot of them. I worked with Chester Byers and Bob Kalin and Tommy Kernan and Hank Janelle and Sam Garrett and all those champions, and I never could do the hard tricks that they did, and I didn't try to, because I learned one thing, that I watched the mothers and the kids in the grandstand, and the tricks that they applauded for the most, why, I try to do those. And I come in with a big loop or a skip or something, which is not too hard to do, but those rollbacks and all those hard tricks, why, they don't appreciate them. But I learned the easy tricks, and I did the tricks that the crowd would appreciate. Then another thing I learned, I was at a show up in Gilroy, California years ago, and Pinky Gist was a clown there. So I was breaking a new horse, and I told the committee man, I said, get Pinky Gist and I'll go down to the school and we'll put on a little show for the school kids to advertise the rodeo. So they said fine. I didn't want to ask Pinky because I know he didn't like, he was getting kind of old and cranky about that time. So anyhow, we rode down to the schoolhouse, we put on a show, and so everything went fine. So during the show, why, as I was trick roping, why, the kids all stood up and hollered and cheered because they were friends of mine. And I learned right quick that the kids, there goes that lousy train again. Well, anyhow, I learned that the kids appreciate things. And let me tell you one thing. I noticed in the Hall of Fame here, Harry Vold has got a whole mess of plaques in there. They practically run out of room for him being the best rodeo stock contractor producer. And I'll tell you why. He has the best bucking horses and the best stock, but he uses a lot of acts. And let me tell you, you know, all of us contract people have been kind of on the hind tit in this business all the time. But we do our best. When anybody wants you to go to a hospital or to a radio show, who do they get? They get the contract people to go, the clowns, announcers, and we all do our best to help promote the show. Now, there's one thing here. I got a little, my horse kind of has a craw in his throat because I wanted to ride my horse in here this morning and get off, but my horse is damn mad at Mr. Pryor because he wouldn't let him ride in here. He said there wasn't room.
But anyhow, if you go by the barn, watch that pinto in the stall there, because he's gunning for you. But anyhow, this is really an honor, and I appreciate it very much. But before I leave, I'd like to introduce my wife, Mary Lee, to show you what you can do with a long rope and with a good eye. You know, I found out it don't cost any more to feed a pretty one than it does an ugly one. Harry Vold will attest to that too. Anyhow, we've had a beautiful time. I've roped a lot of famous people, but that's the best catch I ever made. I'd like to introduce my son, Monty Jr. He's here somewhere. Where are you, son? Are you lost? Maybe he's late. He's here. Where are you? Oh, he's way back there. Say hi. Okay. Anyhow, Junior grew up in the rodeo business. Before he could walk, he could ride in the saddle in front of me. When we'd go into the arena, I would give him to the gate man. The gate man would hold him while I performed, and I'd come and get him back. And he learned to ride and rein a horse before he could walk. And I tried to teach him to trick rope, and he always wanted to go to the carnival or go sell programs or do something. I said, well, if you practice another half an hour, you can go. So anyhow, I made him practice so he can still rope. And all my kids, my grandkids, and when I was married a few years ago, we had the whole wedding party all get up and trick rope. So anyhow, enough of this bull. They got a lot of them out there in the chutes. But anyhow, I'm working at the rodeo this afternoon and tonight. And Mr. Cryer, I want to thank you for the use of the hall, and watch that spotted horse. Thank you. Thank you.
Just another day in the life of rodeo, I can tell you. Our next inductee, Barry Burke, calf roper. To make the introduction remarks, Steve Massey. Miss Massey?
Wow. I intended to start my remarks by saying how excited I was to be here, but Hawkeye, little did I know. Mr. Commissioner, my book is not nearly as thick as Mel's, nor is my voice nearly as strong, so if you can hold the train,
Yes.
I'd appreciate it. When I received the call from Barry Burke asking me to come and introduce him this morning, I gladly accepted and said, well, why, Barry? Why me? He said, well, Steve, really, I don't know. I don't even know why in the hell they selected me. But they did, and I want you to introduce me. I came to a conclusion that I think I know why Barry selected me. He knows that I will probably brag on him, say more nice things about him than anyone there is except himself, and it wouldn't be appropriate for him to do this. And Barry, if you want to know why you were selected, pay attention. I'm going to try to tell him. We're making some notes this morning, maybe trying to decide what we're going to say about our buddy. And I was talking to my 18-year-old son, and we was talking about consistency. I said, Ty, would the word resilience maybe not fit a little better than consistency? And he said, well, yeah, I think so, Dad. He said, resilience sort of means you're so doggone consistent, it's almost disgusting. I said, that's Barry. That's Barry Burke. He was so doggone consistent, it was almost disgusting. Whatever you done, if it was in a rodeo arena, in the calf roping, team roping, or steer wrestling, when you looked up, Barry Burke was there. when the results were announced, Barry Burke was there. He has, without a doubt, been the most consistent and resilient timed event cowboy to my knowledge. 7 times he was runner-up to the world's champion. 17 times he qualified for the National Finals Rodeo. Was the calf roping average winner at the National Finals Rodeo the year his son was born, 1973. He came through 3 eras of calf roping, we like to think. When we all started back in the 60s, Harry, you guys were roping 300-pound calves and scoring them 16, 18 feet. You tie them in 13, 14 seconds, you're going to get a check. Barry Burke was right there, tying them in 13, 14 seconds. Then we dropped down. Smaller calves got high. Stock contractors went to hauling smaller calves, scores shortened a little bit into what we might call the 10, 11 second era. You tie a calf in 10, 11 seconds, you get a check. Barry Burke got checks when they tied them in 10, 11. Then the athletes hit. The young, flat-bellied, barrel-chested calf ropers. Hate them guys. They went to jumping off the right side, flanking the calves when they touched them, tying them when they went by them. They done it, Hawkeye. They still doing it. I hate that too. Barry Burke, he got to tying calves in 8 and 9 seconds. I couldn't believe it. He was a blur. We started to call him Blur Burke. He goes so fast. He would still be competitive today, I think, if he were physically able, because he was resilient. He was like that doggone turtle they talk about that wouldn't turn loose until it thundered, and never thundered where he's at if he's trying to beat you. Because he'd take your money. He'd beat your ear. Reasons maybe for his consistency. Numerous. First, I think horsemanship. Those of you who are in the time business knows that you never drove up to a rodeo. You ever drove into the Burke place. You didn't see him at a jackpot or a horse show, but what Barry Burke's horses were brushed. Their coats were shiny, their eyes were bright. They were fed well. He took care of his horses. Barry's ability to ride different kind of horses. All of us who knows him knows that his favorite kind was a horse that we call bump and lock. He'd run up and just bump a calf and then lock down and let Barry rope and get out of there. But he could ride a freewheeling horse as good as he could that type of horse. He didn't make any difference. And he'd make the horse work the way he wanted him to work. But I think probably the most important part of Barry's horsemanship was his ability to score or start a horse. In all the years of rodeoing with him, against him, around him, I've probably seen Barry run no less than 2,000, maybe 3,000, 4,000 head of calves, steers, and team roping cattle. I don't recall in all that length of time seeing Barry break the bear maybe 10 times. And not once, not one time in all those 2,000 or 3,000 times did I see him a foot late. He could get a horse out of the bear better than anybody that ever backed one behind it. Another reason for Barry's consistency, I feel, he was very inventive. He was not afraid to be the first one to try something. Some of the things I recall that Barry introduced, as far as I'm concerned, in most of rodeo, is a tie that's used a lot by a lot of these flat-bellied guys I'm talking about now. It's a 1 long wrap, 2 short wraps. It's almost like a wrap and 2 hoods, only you don't pull a half hitch on the second wrap. You do it on the third one. Barry Burke's first man ever done that. Another of his first, he did this in a closet for a long time. You've heard of these closet people? I won't elaborate on that, but Barry had a deal in a closet. He's the first man I ever knew of to use baby powder on his ropes. Now you can't go to a rodeo, you can't get in the gate here for the baby powder during the calf. Then they got sticky. Well, most cowboys like myself that had those inventive ideas, we'd get us a handful of dirt, put it on a rope, it'd get heavy. Barry Burke's ropes never were heavy. They were always slick, always smelled real good. He had a can of baby powder in his rope can, now everybody's got. Another I know that Barry is proud of his first. Barry Burke was one of the 7 founding members of the Cowboy chapter of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I'm very proud of that for Barry. I know Barry's very proud of that. He was not afraid to be first at anything. Another of his traits that made him so consistent was, probably better than anybody, this guy knew how to rodeo. He knew how to enter. He knew how to get upright. He knew how to get to and from more rodeos. Heard a story just a while ago, he even flew Larry Mahan's airplane Goldie. Barely knew how to get on one, let alone fly, but Larry got sleepy, so he let Barry fly that thing, and he did, just to get to another rodeo. He could play the mental game probably as good as anybody that ever played it. Nobody could get inside his head. When he turned his horse around and backed into the corner, there were no nerves, there were no buck acorns, there was nothing but the run that he intended to make. He could play that mental game. Numerous times world champion Tom Ferguson called Barry Burke the year after he got his RCA card, and he said, "Barry, would you teach me how to rodeo? I understand that you can do it better than anybody." Barry taught him. Later, Roy Burke, and Roy Cooper, Gary Ledford, you name them. This guy taught them how to play our game, and they all are champions. Of all the things that Barry done that we feel made him so consistent, I think probably the most important, and I think that Barry will agree, maybe he'll tell us when he gets up here in a moment, he was doing something he loved, and he was dadgum good at it. He says that if he were to die tomorrow, you could bury him saying, "Oh, Barry done it because he liked it." He rodeoed, he won, until physically he no longer could. Then he began giving back to the great sport some of the joy that it gave him. I mentioned him taking some of the young ropers and making them champions. I'm from Oklahoma, where Barry's from, and there's a little youth organization down there called the Miniature Rodeo Cowboys Association. Barry Burke took that over about 10 years ago and made it into one of the finest youth rodeo organizations there is in the world. Following that, he became president of the Oklahoma High School Rodeo Association. He took it to heights that you cannot believe. The 2 years he was president of that, 12 young Oklahomans received full free ride college scholarships for their rodeo abilities. This man handled it. I've been a member of the PRCA. I've got a gold card. Been a member since the early 1960s. I have no gold buckle. I have no trips to the NFR. But I have friends that I've made because of this business. I have a camaraderie that I've experienced that has made me damn proud to say I'm a professional. This man is one of them. The only way a person such as myself could ever be part of a Hall of Fame induction would be one of his buddies invite him to make their introduction. That's happened to me today. When Barry asked me to do this, I told him, "Barry, I will be more honored than you." And I am. So it is with great pride and unmeasurable pleasure that I can present to you my buddy, OBB, Mr. Barry Burke.
The plaque shall read, Barry Burke, calf roper. Barry Burke, a 17-time National Finals Rodeo qualifier, has been described as the greatest calf roper never to have won a World's Championship, although he finished as reserve champion from 1967 to 1973 and again in 1975, and in third position 3 times. Burke was born into a rodeo family. As a youth, traveled the circuit with his father, covering more miles by age 13 than most people in a lifetime. Burke competed in the junior and college rodeo in bareback as well as calf roping. He was the American Junior Rodeo Association all-around champion from 1957 through 61, won the calf roping 5 times and 3 steer wrestling titles. Quote, "I enjoyed rodeoing, always have, always will. If I should die tomorrow, people can come to my funeral and say, well, old Barry enjoyed it while he was here," unquote. Born Duncan, Oklahoma, January 11th, 1942. Barry Burke, calf roper.
Wow, what a deal. I tell you what, this is a great honor, a great tribute for me and my family. My family has been in this rodeo business for, seemed like all of my life. And if it wasn't for my mom to feeding me and watching me grow, and my dad for teaching me everything I know, and a brother that's growed up with me and helped me in my trials and tribulations, and a great wife that I have. I can rope pretty damn good too, Monty. I roped a pretty good catch too. I got an old Texas girl named Cheryl Burke that's been a great help to me in my life and my career. And we have a fine son named Blair Burke that's carrying on in, I hope, Dad's footsteps. And I hope one of these days that he can walk through this hall and be proud of what I've done and what the rodeo business has meant to me and my family and to him. And I just hope and pray that this rodeo business keeps getting better and better and better, because it's the greatest life in the world for a young man like me that it's growed up in it, and my son that I'm proud he's a part of it. I just want you to know that there's more to rodeoing than roping calves. You know, I'm proud I'm a calf roper, but you know, I went a many a mile down that road in the back. So I was raised up in the back seat of the car with my dad I can remember going to New York, riding in the back seat of I'm not sure, it might have been an old Ford. Might have been one like Monty rode in. But Freckles Brown was back there with me, and I spurred his dadgum suitcase all the way to New York. I did, didn't I, Mom? I spurred his suitcase all the way to New York. And this guy right here, old Casey Tibbs, he used to call me Popcorn. And I guess what I love so much about being put in the Hall of Fame is being put in there with guys like that I love so much, like Freckles Brown, and guys that I remember like Casey Tibbs, and guys that I went down the rodeo with like Larry Mahan. You know, the friends that we get out of this rodeo business, and as you can tell, I don't have any notes. It's all from right here. That's where my notes are. From my heart, I remember going down the trail with Larry Mahan and Tom Ferguson and Roy Cooper. And I remember the days I spent with Harry Vold and Bob Barnes back east. You know, being put in here with guys like that in the Hall of Fame is the greatest honor that I could ever have in my life. I've won the National Finals Rodeo. As Monty said, I don't have no gold buckle. I don't have a gold buckle, but it's wonderful to be put in here beside some guys that do. And that's really great, you know. And I've won the National Finals. I've won the Cheyenne Frontier Days, the Houston Astrodome, the Calgary Stampede, the Cow Palace, San Antonio. You know what? I never won Fort Worth, and I always wanted to. I always wanted to win Fort Worth, and I always wanted to win the steer wrestling at the Cheyenne Frontier Days. and I won second there 3 times by 1/10. You know? They cheated me out of that. One year, James Bynum's damned old horse reared over the bear one year at Cheyenne. He did. The sucker reared over the bear at Cheyenne, you know, and he didn't break the bear, and he beat me 1/10. And I wanted that steer wrestling at Cheyenne. So I've been more than a calf roper. I cherish the days and the hours that I went down the road with my friends, you know, just like flying old Goldie and going to all those places with Mahan and that plane of his and being a part of his life. And I can remember so many times that I'd be at the rope and shoot in down there, and the buck and shoots down here. Mahan would come down there to me and he'd say, "Hey Barry," he says, "I got one that, by gosh, it's damn hard to ride. Come pull my rope." You know, because when I went down there, he knew that if I pulled his rope, that I was going to ride that bull just as hard as he was, you know. And I seen him ride many a tough sucker that I tell you what, I don't know for damn sure if he could rode him better than me. Took 2 of us to ride that bull. But you know, JC Trujillo went to some rodeos with me. I was proud of being more than a calf roper. I guess what I was proud of was any time that a bareback rider or a bull rider or anybody in the rodeo business needed a ride to the rodeo, needed a ride from Bonifay, Florida to the next rodeo, or anytime I could be of any help to Harry Vold or any stock contractors like Bob Barnes, you know, I was just thrilled to be a part, to be some help. You know, I love the rodeo fans, and nowadays it seems like the cowboys today are living out there in that fast lane. We don't have enough time to spend with the committees like we used to, and maybe stay a whole week at a rodeo and be a part of that committee in that town and that rodeo, and meet the friends like we used to spend the whole week at Sydney, Iowa. You know, eating corn on the cob and living in a house with a person and visiting with the committee man there, and maybe help Mike Servey back there in the back, maybe help pull a rig and a saddle off a bronc that afternoon because he was short of help. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed probably being a part of the rodeo business more than I was a calf roper. I loved rope. I did. But I think what I love it most of all was the people that I met in the rodeo business and the friends that I've accumulated throughout the land, and being able to go back to the Calgary Stampede, being able to go back to San Francisco, to Bonifay, Florida, to Houston, and see people walk up to you and shake your hand and say, "Hey Barry, it's good to see you again." And to be put in here in the Cowboy Hall, in this Hall of Fame, with all these world's champions, like my Uncle Clyde, with Roy Cooper, and being put in there right between Roy Cooper and Toots Mansfield, that's quite an honor. I guarantee you one thing, I won't ever forget today. It's probably one of the greatest days of my life, and I appreciate the Hall for selecting me, and I appreciate Bill Linderman for what he done. Dale Smith, Mr. Cryer for what he's doing. And I appreciate all you people. That train ain't gonna get the best of me, I guarantee you. I appreciate all you rodeo fans, the rodeo stock contractors and committeemen, because if it wasn't for all of us, y'all, us cowboys couldn't have what we got today. And the first day money I won at the NFR paid $365. And I'm damn proud that it's as big as it is today. And praise God, it's going to get bigger. And just thank you all for coming today and be a part of my life. Thank you.
Barry, congratulations.
The next inductee, JC Trujillo, bareback. To make the introduction remarks, Mr. David Allen. David?
sir. Thank you. Before I begin my introductions with JC and my comments, I'd like to congratulate all of the inductees today. I would like to say special thanks to Mr. Harry Vold and to Monty Henson for being a real special friend of mine for over these years. It's meant a lot to me, and congratulations to all of you. Actually, I'm just stalling, trying to think, what do you say about JC Trujillo that hasn't been said or rumored or whatever? I do know that it's strictly an honor and a pleasure for me to speak on his behalf. When you think about it, JC, this is an incredible honor. You came out of a bareback class that included Joe Alexander, T.J. Walter, Jack Ward, Rusty Riddle, Scotty Platts, on and on. It's incredible, and it's a reward you richly deserve. If I was asked to describe JC's number one asset, I would have to say it's his sincere and total dedication to not only his family, but his friends. This is one of the most loyal human beings I've ever known in my life. When he's your friend, he is your friend, and that's all there is to it. There are no questions, no boundaries, no ifs, ands, or buts, and that's a very strong measure of a man. JC was born the middle child of Albert and Stella Trujillo in Prescott, Arizona. He has a sister, Irene, who lives in Dewey, Arizona, and a brother, Frank, who resides in Prescott. We often kid Albert and Stella that they had 3 children, one of each kind. And I believe it's true, because JC is truly one of a kind as a human being and an individual. He began his rodeo career in 1954 at the age of 6 when he entered the calf roping in Prescott, Arizona. Little did he know that this was going to be the beginning of a rodeo career that would span over 30 years of his life. In 1966, JC won the bareback riding in the Arizona Junior Rodeo Association, and in 1967 he entered his first PRCA, which was then RCA Rodeo, and in his hometown of Prescott, Arizona. JC went on to college rodeo, joining the NIRA in 1968 while he attended Mesa Community College. His first year there, he promptly won the National Bareback Championship, and his second year there in 1969, he finished second to Chris Ledoux. In 1973, he qualified for his first NFR. He went on to qualify for 12 NFRs. He won the PRCA World Bareback Championship in 1981, and in his entire career, he finished in the PRCA top 10 8 times. During his career, JC became one of the most popular ambassadors for the sport of rodeo. And I think just about everybody here is aware of that. Nobody had a bigger smile, a better attitude, and one of the most positive approaches to life than JC. He still does. He was often called the Lee Trevino of rodeo. He would always show up at a rodeo with a wide smile and a new fresh story from the road. He was driven to compete. Competing meant everything to him. Winning meant everything to him except one thing, and that again was his friends. He's never forgotten that. Speaking of his friends, I talked to, while putting this little talk together, a couple of his friends that he rodeoed with. He went down the road with Jack Ward, T.J. Walter, Rusty Riddle, and the late Scotty Platts. And what a combination, if you were around then, those guys made. They always had a new story, and sometimes maybe the cops right behind them, but these guys owned the bareback world when they traveled. Jack Ward and TJ told me that JC was probably in his early days one of the most gullible, naive individuals they ever rodeoed with, and they took full advantage of it every chance they could. Every time they were hungry, they had a method of flipping and matching quarters to see who would buy, and JC didn't figure out for a number of years why he always bought. They had a con game on with him. They all scratched their head at a certain time, which meant what they had, and JC never did figure out to this day how they were matching quarters. Jack said JC just couldn't imagine why he was so unlucky at all of this. TJ told a good story and I am telling the PG-rated stories. TJ told a good story about JC when they, in 1973 or 4, when they were all trying to make the NFR. It was late in the fall. They were entered at the Cow Palace. TJ said, I remember once that JC, Jack, Scotty, and myself were all trying to make the bottom holes of the bareback standings for the NFR. We decided to work the Cow Palace and then work Bismarck to get some final points. At the Cow Palace, JC came up and asked me, how are you getting to Bismarck? TJ said he couldn't resist. I told JC that there was a bad blizzard in the Midwest, and there's only one way to get there. You had to fly to Chicago, charter a Continental's bus in Chicago to Minneapolis, and then fly from Minneapolis to Bismarck. JC said, all right, I'll get on it right away. So off he goes to the payphone. He gets on, he calls Continental Trailways in Chicago, because TJ said the biggest concern you have, Doodle, is getting on that bus out of Chicago because it's filling up. So JC's on the phone calling Continental Trailways in Chicago immediately, and of course they don't take reservations, and JC is desperate to make the NFR, and the fight was on. He argued with the bus depot, pleading his case about the blizzard, which there was none, and the guy in Chicago knew that, and how he had to be on the bus to make the National Finals Rodeo, which the guy in Chicago had never heard of the National Finals Rodeo. TJ and Jack and Scotty all let this go on for a while, and about 3 days later they told JC how they were getting there, and so the scam was off. Two other things that Rusty and TJ and Jack told me. They said first that JC Trujillo was absolutely the worst driver in the sport of rodeo. They said that when we all traveled together, one guy had to stay up with him to keep him from getting lost. But the most common thing that they all said was, he is an absolute true class cowboy. He was a great bareback rider, he's a great friend, and he's someone that we love dearly. As a family man, JC is a many times world champion. He and his wife of 14 years, Margot, were made for each other. And again, it's often said they probably deserve each other. I do know one thing for sure. They do truly love each other. I've seen it ups and downs, and these two have been through it all, and they are one of the class couples I have ever known. They've raised two beautiful and special daughters, the two loves of their life and also two loves of my life. Annie Rebecca, 13, Sammy Lou, 12. Both of these young ladies have the Trujillo and Growney charm and personality. Think about that. Annie and Sammy are now presently running the Trujillo family in Steamboat, and JC is about fourth in the standings behind Margot. In closing, I'll tell you that JC Trujillo is a cowboy inside and out, and he's proud of being a cowboy. He loves the West, he loves the land, he respects the land. He loves kids, and more than anything, he loves life. And JC, on behalf of all of your friends, because I feel like I'm just representing thousands of people who have grown to love you, we love you also. Congratulations on your induction into the PRCA Hall of Fame. It's an honor you richly deserve. And ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you the one and only JC Trujillo.
The plaque shall read, J.C. Trujillo, bareback. James Charles Trujillo began his rodeo career at the age of 6 in his hometown of Prescott. His early prowess resulted in the bareback championship of the Arizona Junior Rodeo Association, participation on the Arizona State University rodeo team, the 1968 intercollegiate bareback champion. Trujillo joined the association in 1967. He hit the pro circuit full throttle in 1972, eventually qualifying for 12 national finals rodeos. Long known the ability to be realistic about yourself and knowledge of your limitations. He is famous for his realistic and ever positive attitudes and his megawatt smile. Born Prescott, Arizona, May 10, 1948, world champion bareback 1981. Ladies and gentlemen, J.C. Trujillo, bareback.
Yeah, Mr. Cryer, I'm glad I made this one too. I missed the one last night. Well, I'll tell you, this is a delightful treat to be recognized with champions like this, guys that have been my heroes for a long time, and then for me to be in the same window with these guys: Bruce Ford, Eddie Akridge, Jack Bushbaum, Joe Alexander, Larry Mahan, Sean Davis, Freckles Brown. Unbelievable. I have to just think back, you know, the first time that I was going to enter a junior rodeo. My dad, Albert, reading the Prescott Evening newspaper, saying, hey, they're having a the Yavapai Sheriff's Posse's having a junior rodeo. Do you boys want to enter? And we got my sister Irene entered too. But he made me promise that I wouldn't cry. Now, if you get in this calf riding, by the way, David Allen, it was calf riding and not calf roping. You get in this calf riding, you can't be crying, you know. I guess after having an older brother and sister picking on me all the time, I might have been a crybaby, you know. But that's where I started this rodeo career of mine, Prescott, Arizona. And border to border and coast to coast, I picked up more friends than a person can ever imagine. And not just plain old friends, but all really good friends. When my brother and I, Frank, and my cousin Joe Vesseray went out and built us a bucking barrel out behind the house there, whoever knew that I would be standing up here being recognized not only as a world's champion, but as a member of the ProRodeo Hall of Fame. When they let me know about this in March, I didn't know what to think, and I started writing a speech right then, and it never did work. I got up early this morning and tried to sit down and write another speech, and it didn't work either. Margot said, well, just say it from the heart. Well, I have a lot to be thankful for, and I'm so thankful that my family can be here. My mom and dad, Albert and Stella, in great health, and they're here. My brother and his family, and my sister, my wonderful wife, Margot. And you know, I think having this honor here is so special to me because of the fact that when my two young daughters, Annie and Sammy, were young, they really never can remember the whole rodeo thing, you know. And when they inducted me into this hall, not only did they induct me, but they inducted those two little girls, because they can carry this on for the rest of their life. I'd like to thank the PRCA and all the contestants. It's a wonderful sport, and it's a wonderful game, this rodeo. I've tried to think all the people that I could thank here, and from all my great fans, all my great friends, and my wonderful family. This is all, I'm not the only one being inducted, but all my fans, all my friends, and all my family are right there with me. Well, I guess this is about all I can say, but other than this is a great honor, and I'm very happy that I've become a cowboy. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Our next honoree, Monty Henson Saddlebronc. To make the presentation and the introduction, world champion himself, a Hall of Famer, Mr. Larry Mahan. And I also say that Larry is one of the 8 persons that serves with me on the selection committee. Those 8 gentlemen, as Larry can testify, and some of those are here today, it's a difficult task that we have, and I know that we all treasure that opportunity and have a great deal of respect for the process, and Larry is one of those persons, and so for him to be an introductory today takes on special meaning. Larry?
Thank you, Commissioner. It's an honor to be here today, and especially a real treat when Monty wanted to know if I would come up here and say a few words about him. And it is tough being on this committee. Randy Whitty, I mean, here's a guy that whoever comes up with the biggest bribe has a good chance of getting his vote. I'm probably the only legit one in the program. Before I get started, I'd just like to say that, you know, I rodeoed with a great group of guys, Barry Burke, and many times he was there on that bull with me. In fact, I'd go down there and Barry'd come down there and he'd say, this bull has no idea how bad he's drawn. He has no idea what a steel bath he's going to get. And go on, and pretty soon he'd totally convinced me that I could do it, whether I wanted to or not. And that's the thing that I see with the people who are being inducted today. The attitudes of all of them are absolutely far above the average individual. Some people never change. Sean Davis, Odessa, Texas, 1967. We're walking by the pool to the rodeo this one night. We're running a little bit late and it's cold. There's ice across the top of the pool. They shoved me in. These guys have, you know, and he still has that sense of humor. He comes up to me today and he said, you must be getting a little better looking. He said, when I went in the office the other day, 5 of those women in there thought I was you. Well, it won't be long and I'll have it over Sean. My hair is getting real thin now, but I'm letting it grow long in the back so I can comb it over the top like Sean. Monty Henson, man, I called Neil Gay last night and I said, I don't know what to say about this bronc rider. He said, well, his dad was running an old joint for Benny Binion down there when he was a policeman in Dallas, and so Monty started hanging over there around the Mesquite Rodeo grounds when they didn't have a cover on the arena, and I thought he was going to tell me how proud A.R. and Mrs. Henson were of the fact that his boy was going to go over next door and run with Donnie and Pete Gay and learn how to be a rodeo cowboy. He said, oh, A.R. called me up and said, you let those damn kids come over there and play in the mud all day and all night, and then you send them home and we have to clean them up. So I don't know how supportive A.R. was of that. I know when he started winning all these buckles, A.R. said, Monty, let me wear this first one for a while. I remember Monty Henson in 1971. He shows up at the rodeo school. Of course, I'd seen him around Mesquite there, and he was getting on broncs, and he'd get his head up in the air, and there'd be that big hawk profile look going across the arena, and he'd buck off a few, but he'd ride quite a few of them. He had a lot of heart. He had the biggest 6-second heart I'd ever seen in my life when he came to this bronc riding school. Now, he wouldn't fall off, but he'd just, I mean, he'd, kind of like Monty Montana, I think he might have lived that same philosophy. I didn't try to learn the tough tricks, just the easy ones. Find out what the judges look for. So he eliminated all the tough stuff. All he learned how to do was reach to the front end, turn his toes out, stick them in the neck, and wait. The philosophy being, if you move your feet a certain way, they give you money. So he tried to keep it simple. And of course, as time went on, I skipped around here. The problem with the 6-second program that Monty had going, he'd make nice rides on these horses for 6 seconds, and he would just lock up in the kennel. His brain would send the message to his feet, hang in the kennel. So he'd hang in the kennel there for 2 seconds, and I told him, I said, son, you're never going to make it. I said, you have to ride him for 8 seconds. Okay. He'd get on, and boy, he'd scrape one for 6 seconds, and he'd hang in the kennel again. And then I guess Donnie Gay, being the cocky individual that he was, started winning so much that Hawkeye said, wait a minute, I'm going to keep it simple. If I just go ahead and move my feet 3 or 4 more jumps in that 2 seconds, all of these people will start flocking around me. And Monty, now into his 6th marriage, liked what the buckles brought. One of the greatest attitudes that I'd ever been around. I've been around Monty when he was on top. I've been around him when he had to, you get on top of that mountain, you ride down through the slumps, as they could be called, and depending on the individual, you'd stay down there as long as you wanted to. Well, Monty never did stay down there very long. He would always make that turnaround in a hurry. And I think that that's sort of a common denominator with all of the people that are being inducted here today, and many of the past people, champions or not. It's how long they stay on the bottom, because I've yet to, even through the worlds that I've ran through, I've yet to find that smooth plane where everything just stays the same. It'd be a little bit boring. So it's how we handle the adverse conditions. Monty's handled all of them extremely well. He's been a great supporter of rodeo. He's been a great spokesperson for rodeo. I personally am proud to see the intelligence of the Coors Company, not only to be involved with rodeo, but to take such an outstanding personality and use him in marketing their product and the tie-in with rodeo. Here's a guy that can do many things outside of the rodeo arena. He moved his feet that 2 extra seconds because he saw how well I moved my feet those last 2 seconds. And then when I quit rodeo, and there's a transition period there where you have to do something to burn out on the road. So Eddie Akridge, one of my heroes, I said, yeah, I might as well be a singer. So Monty Henson, he decides to be a singer. He's still singing. My career, well, it was better when I quit than when I started, but there was still a lot of room for improvement. Monty, you'll see him at these rodeos around the country working for the Coors people. He'll play music for them in some of their accounts if necessary. He's always there to do whatever has to be done. He's not looking for a free lunch. Now that he has reached an age of, let's call it maturity, because I remember those years when you're rodeo, and there's a lot of things that you can get away with that aren't absolutely and totally mature. We sort of live in a fantasy world that there's not a real world out there to where you really have to face responsibility every day other than getting you and your saddle and chaps and everything to the next event. And I've been proud of Monty to see how he has handled that transition so that he can go into the world now and become a good businessman and work for a class company. We know he's a class guy, or Coors, of course, wouldn't have him involved with him. And now, of course, he has the biggest challenge of all. His beautiful wife, Debbie, down here, taking a picture so that she has it on tape to find out later about these other 5 wives. But you're the only one that's the mother. And of course, now he has the opportunity to be the father, which I think the biggest challenge of all is about, well, you're in it right now. All the rest of them have just been a piece of cake. One of the greatest bronc riders of all time, 3 times world's champion saddle bronc rider, has always been a champion since the first day I met him. And he's got to be a pretty good kind of a guy to put up with A.R. and Neil Gay. One of the greatest bronc riding champions in the world. He can tell you more about himself than I can, and he loves to do it. Monty Henson.
The plaque shall read, Monty Hawkeye Henson Saddle Bronc. Hawkeye Henson's style and ability have been compared to those of the legendary Casey Tibbs. As a boyhood friend of Pete and Don Gay, it should be not surprising that Henson's first association with rodeo was in Mesquite, Texas. On the way to qualifying for 14 national finals rodeos and earning 3 world titles, Henson became one of the most colorful and personable cowboys on the circuit and a master of the flying dismount. Henson has been described as the epitome of the new rodeo cowboy, a businessman in boots. I'm a cowboy. That's the best thing anybody could say about me. If I could have that on my tombstone, here lies Hawkeye, a cowboy. Then I can die a happy person. Born Farmersville, Texas, October 22nd, 1953. World champion saddle bronc 75, 76, and 1982. Monty Hawkeye Henson saddle bronc.
Well, I had to make a few notes. You know, there's 3 signs of getting old. One's you lose your memory, and I forgot the other 2. So, first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd like to congratulate everyone that's being inducted today. I don't feel like I have the opportunity to talk as much as most people do, because once again, I am the youngest one of the crowd, and I want you all to know that. It's the first time in a long time I've been the youngest one in the crowd, too. When I was a kid, I was probably 5 years old the first time Mom and Dad took me to Fort Worth. I'm like JC now, I'm getting choked up. And we watched the rodeo there, and of course all I ever wanted to be was a cowboy when I was little anyway. I didn't know which facet of the cowboy business I wanted to be in. I just wanted to know I wanted to be a cowboy. And when I was 7 years old, Dad took me to play baseball. This brand new team, we went over to join the team, and this one little kid stepped up to me, a little short, cocky guy, stopped, walked up to me, he was 7 years old, said, "My name's Donnie Gay, and I'll be the world champion bull rider." Of course, Dad and I looked at each other like, yeah, his brains leaked out his ear already, you know. So Donnie, I got to going over to the Mesquite Rodeo, as Mahan said earlier, when I was about like 8 years old. And in those days, the Mesquite Rodeo was pretty lean. I mean, Neil, I'd seen him sit out there on that horse a lot of times, hoping somebody'd show up so he could pay some bills. And there wasn't a lot of people come around those days to the rodeo. He was really trying to get it to work. And if you worked for Neil Gay, if you weren't doing something, you had to run in place. So that's why a lot of times when I'm at the rodeo, you see me down there putting on flanks or adjusting them or moving horses up and stuff like that. I know Neil's going to come from Mesquite to scream at me probably if I don't help. I learned a lot of things growing up around the Mesquite, Texas rodeo. How hard it is to make it when you don't have no money. And I'm getting choked up again. I have to wait a minute. Yeah, it's I started riding steers when I was 9 years old. Of course, Donnie had the best instructor in the world, because if y'all know Donnie, y'all know he knows everything, you know. If you don't believe it, ask him. TJ asked him one time how I'd been doing. 45 minutes later, he said, "I'll never ask you again as long as I live how you been doing, Donnie." Well, he was an expert, all right. He told me that I had to do certain things to ride. We started getting on bulldog and steers, and my mom and dad didn't understand rodeo, and they didn't want me getting on something so dangerous. So, being nice Christian people, they tried to keep me from it as much as they could. Well, when you deal with somebody that runs on a one-track vine like I do, that was the worst thing you could do. All that did was just feed it a little bit, just a little bit of bait, make me want to do it more. I started riding bulls when I was 13, and I couldn't ride in a covered wagon with the flaps tied down. When I was 16, I started getting on saddle broncs, and I just fell in love with it, you know. I went to Larry Mahan's school, as he told you, when I was 17 years old, and I got my card that year. When I was a senior in high school, I had my PRCA card. Well, that don't mean too much when you're in Mesquite, Texas, because there's only one rodeo right around there you can work, you know. When I got out of high school, I left home. I had 25 whole dollars all at one time in my pocket. Went to going to rodeos, working the labor list, mounting out bulls and mounting out broncs. It's been one hell of a party ever since then. I've been around the greatest people in the whole world. I would recommend this to anybody. It's kind of like Clyde Van Voort said one time about rodeoing. I wouldn't take $1 million for the experiences I've had, although I wouldn't give you $1.25 for another one of them wrecks either, you know. I always wanted to rodeo hard, and I'd enter 200 rodeos a year and get to 150 of them. And Donnie taught me the more you went to, when you're cold, enter twice as many as you do when you're hot. That's the best way to get out of that slump. You rode your way in it, you can ride your way out of it. When I first started and got out on the road there in 1973, was the first time I met Harry Vold, and of course I knew who Harry Vold was. Everybody does. And I was in Montgomery, Alabama. I caught a ride over there, and I had $3 left, and I was entered bronc ride, and we got 3 heads, so I knew there wouldn't be any problem there, you know. Was I nuts? Anyway, I asked for a job about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. "Mr. Vold, could you hire me to work the labor list?" He said, "No, we're full tonight, son." Well, I asked him 27 more times before 8 o'clock. Finally, he said, "If you'll shut up, I'll give you a job." So one night, Johnny Gass was there picking up. Doug Vold was there riding broncs. Both of them were up in the bronc ride, and I wasn't up that night. Harry said, "Can you pick up?" Damn right, I come from Mesquite. We can do anything there. Of course, I never had before, but I figured, you know. Well, they led me through it and helped me quite a bit. I had the opportunity to see guys like Casey Tibbs ride, Jim Shoulders. I am. It takes a minute.
saw me right.
Yeah, I say, and that old guy Mayhem, right? Barely remember that. And to be put in a hall with all his names that I read about is amazing. I'm sorry I get choked up. Nobody usually sees me do that. I'd like to thank my parents, my whole family, my wife and my little boy. And I'd like to dedicate this to all my friends. You know, you start being a cowboy because you want to, not because you have to. And you quit because you have to, not because you want to. I'd like to thank Coors for bringing me out a hell of a slump. First of all, how many people you know drink for a damn living? Now, I've had the opportunity to work with a great bunch of people at Coors. Not only do they seem nice, they are nice people and they care about the rodeo business. It's a great big family, kind of like rodeo is around Coors. I've had the opportunity to help promote the sport that did so much for me. And I hope I have the opportunity to do it a whole lot more. The Coors program has really grown a lot. And the last 3 years I've had the opportunity to grow with it. I know a little bit more about rodeo now than what's the event before the bronc ride? When do we pull them, Harry? You know? So it's an honor for me to be one of the ones that came out of rodeo and get to work with a sponsor. I hope this in some way opens the door for a lot more people that are competing in rodeo to work along with it for a long time. Because I'm one of those lucky ones that still gets to be around the sport after he gets through riding. I'd like to thank y'all one more time, tell my family how much I love them, and I'll see you at the next one.
Our next honoree, Bob Barnes, stock contractor, to make the introduction, to present Mr. Barnes, Bob Thing.
Thank you, Lou. For you folks that don't know it, today's Lou's birthday. May we give him a little hand for that. Looks pretty good for 65, don't you think? You know, I feel right at home up here for some reason. This mic doesn't work very good and the place is oversold. Kind of like most rodeos that we're involved in. I consider it quite an honor to be asked by Bob today to introduce him. There are just certain people that are really special, and Bob Barnes is one of them. For those people that you know, that know Bob, I'm sure you'll agree with me. A handshake with Bob is better than a 20-page contract with any attorney I know. Your turn's coming, Bob. Bob told me he was getting a little nervous. He might even get to stuttering before he gets through up here. Bob was born and raised in Cherokee, Iowa. Still calls Cherokee home. And many of you folks are here today from Cherokee to see your favorite son being inducted into this Hall of Fame. We're glad to have you. For over 45 years, Bob Barnes has been doing what he likes doing the best, producing PRCA rodeos. It's going to get worse, Bob. He and his family are the PRCA's longest running stock contracting company, still in the hands of its original owners. Bob started in the early 1950s when he and his sister Marjorie bought 8 bucking horses with a loan for $75 each. And knowing Bob, he probably got a pretty good interest rate. Bob Barnes has been the driving force for PRCA rodeos in the Midwest. He was the only one for a long time. Bob has branched out now to produce rodeos in 12 states from Montana to New York. He had a hard time even getting here today. He almost missed his dinner last night for being in New York and trying to get from Erie, I guess it was, to Detroit, from Detroit to Denver, and Denver down to Colorado Springs. Says a lot about Bob. He got here. When the bugle blows, Bob Barnes will be here, and that's been his saying for a long time. And any of you know Bob, you know that's true. Bob would be the first to tell you that without his hard-working family, wife Danita, sons John, Marty, and his daughter Mitzi, many of his accomplishments would have not have been possible. I'm sure Bob wouldn't mind if I take a minute and introduce his lovely wife Danita. Danita, you want to stand up and say hello? Just let the people know who you are. When Danita calls Bob Charlie, it's time for him to watch out. He calls the rest of us Charlie, it's okay, but when she says Charlie, he knows he better watch out. If they ever decide to add a wing to that hall over there for hard-working PRCA stock contractor wives, Danita would be the charter inductee. Bob's list of accomplishments is as lengthy as his years in the rodeo business. Just to name a few, Bob was the 1984 Stock Contractor of the Year. He served on the National Finals Rodeo Commission. He's been on the Stock Contractor Executive Council and is still currently serving on the PRCA Board of Directors. Bob is only one of 2 stock contractors who have had livestock selected for every national final PRCA. One of the people that Bob's really helped to get started and he's really proud of is one of the outstanding feature acts we have in rodeo today, Mr. Quail Dobbs. You know, Bob has a reputation of being rather tough to work for, especially back at the ranch. Bob expects an honest day's labor out of his hands, whether they are axe or truck drivers. Just to illustrate this, when Quail started working for Bob, he was over 6 feet tall. And any of you people seen Quail lately, you know he hasn't gotten over it yet. The Hall of Fame has many outstanding individuals enshrined there, with many more yet to come. But none have been or will be dedicated any more to the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association than Mr. Bob Barnes. I think Bob would bleed PRCA blood. I think Bob would tell you that after 45 years, he's reached the pinnacle of success in the rodeo business with his induction today into the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame. Bobo, why don't you come on up here and say a few words? I know you've been waiting. Would you give him a big hand, if you would, for Mr. Bob Barnes. This gentleman's earned the honor.
We appreciate it.
The plaque shall read, Bob Barnes, Stock Contractor. Bob Barnes has been called a premier rodeo producer in America's heartland. The Colonel, as he is known, prides himself on being able to produce what he advertises a top professional rodeo. Barnes started his career as a teenage bareback rider. In 1950, he and his sister Marge decided to try their hand at producing rodeos. The first professional rodeo was produced after the Korean War, and by 1953 they hit the road with a full string of stock, and Barnes Rodeo Company was on its way. Barnes Rodeo Company is the longest-running individually owned and operated stock contracting company in the country, and the major contributor to development of the sport in the Midwest. Barnes, the 1984 Stock Contractor of the Year, says his greatest enjoyment he gets from a rodeo is seeing the results when the top stock is matched against the better cowboys. Born Cherokee, Iowa, April 19th, 1929, Bob Barnes, Stock Contractor.
Up, sir.
You really need this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, I didn't think it ever happened. I didn't think I'd get up those steps, but I did. Got escorted up there by Miss Michigan. We had a rodeo in Iron River for almost 30 years, and we're pretty proud of that. I just got these notes in case, you know, that I forget what to say. I can't believe that JC and Hawkeye and Barry, you know, come up here and got emotional. I just can't see how that could happen. I mean, I know it won't ever bother me. But anyway, it's really been great. I was raised on an Iowa farm. I never saw my dad in anything but blue bib overalls. He passed away in '58. My sister Marjorie and I started in the rodeo business, and we did buy 8 head of horses off of Tuffy Brewer at Yankton, South Dakota for $75. And yes, the interest was right, Mr. Bob. It was on the credit all the way. There wasn't any interest. And in another year, we're going to have the deal all paid off. But anyway, it has been great. Last night I was at the nicest dinner I've ever been to and had the nicest speech ever said about 7 individuals that the commissioner said. And he taught me that, by golly, I was somebody, and that really made me feel good, along with these other guys. It's really an honor to be here with all these guys. They're all champions. They've all been to our rodeos, and we really appreciate them. Michael, husband, called me that eventful day in March and told me what was happening. Then the commissioner said, we're all going to have a good time. Boy, we sure are. The next day I talked to T.J. Walder on the phone. I don't know whether it was about a new rodeo we were going to have or about one of the usual fines I was going to get. But anyway, I said, isn't it kind of strange that, you know, 2 of us stock contractors are going to go into the Hall of Fame? And he said, no. He said, really, they wanted 3. He said the good, the bad, and the ugly, but they couldn't find the good one, so they just took you and Harry. And I didn't think Harry's too bad, and I don't think he's so ugly either. As Monty Montana and some of the others said, my life has kind of been evolved around ladies. My mother was my greatest helper in the beginning. At the very first rodeo, she made the loose meat so we could sell a few sandwiches, and she also collected the money. And my sister Marjorie, I wish that train had come along here pretty quick, but anyway, my sister Marjorie and I, Marjorie was the next one. We dug a lot of post holes together, and we got, Marjorie kind of went to dry land farming when the water got over the top of the bucking chutes and the flies fled in Lamar's, Iowa. But she's always been along with the greatest thing could ever happen to anybody happened to me on Groundhog's Day in 1958. Don't bother me a bit, I'm just tough as you guys are. But anyway, the groundhog knew there's going to be a lot more spring days on that day, and there has been. There's been 36 years of wonderful spring days in all my life. Anyway, as they say to that union was born a daughter by the name of Mitzi, and Mitzi's here today, and Mitzi and Michael are both here. They have 2 lovely grandchildren for me, grandsons, and by golly, in about 2 weeks, 1 day and 37 minutes on the 29th of August, Mitzi's going to have another one. So think of all the workers we're going to have. Thanks for coming, Mitzi. Last night, we do have a rodeo going on right now in Gary, New York, and it's the largest for the performances that we have. 6 performances. It started Wednesday night, and Denise and I was there Wednesday night, and Thursday night our boys, Marty and John, were there last night and had a rodeo performance and drove most of the night to Cleveland, Ohio, got on an airplane. They arrived here before I did this morning, and about 2 o'clock they're going to get on another airplane and be back in Gary, New York this evening. And I'm really proud of our family. Ours is a family operation. The name Bob Barnes is just a name, but the Barnes family is the reason that we're by golly here today. As we went along through the years, I used to drive an old truck and haul the stock, and Danita would do all the secretarying. Then the young, kids come along, and she had a pretty tough time of doing the secretarying, the bookkeeping, the taking care of the stock and all that. So we had to hire a babysitter. And this babysitter was a young girl out of Cherokee, and she lived with us. And I believe it was because of her that maybe we really wanted a larger family. But she took our kids, shopping, and on the back of her Wranglers, there was only 3 of those belts, loops, one in the middle and one on each side. So all we could really have was our 3 kids, one hanging on each one of the belt loops, and they called her KK. And her folks are here today, and that's the Bleakley family, and we're awful glad they're here. But anyway, can't you laugh a little bit about that? I mean, I kind of thought that was a pretty good story. Now, I'm going to go to my other page. We kind of started at a major rodeo that's now gone on for 41 consecutive years at Spooner, Wisconsin. I had a friend that picked up for me by the name of Babe Cox. That time he lived in Clear Lake, Iowa. And I got a card in the mail, and it was just a postcard. That time it was for a penny, and it had a lot of, kind of dust on it or smoke or anything. It was from a plumbing and, by golly, heating outfit in Hammond, Wisconsin. So on the way to Spooner to sign this contract for kind of the 2nd or 3rd year, Babe Cox and I stopped in Hammond, Wisconsin. And I remember going in the door, and it was kind of dark and dingy, and we took a briefcase in. Are we still all right here? All right. Well, can it keep on going? Okay. Yes, sir, that's all right. Too bad. No, sir. Well, I know it was Mel Amber's fault. I mean, he stayed up here forever. But anyway, can I go on? Go on. All right, I'll go on just to start a life. We got to this Hammond, Wisconsin. We set down the briefcase in this door. We wasn't going to do anything because we was waiting. I got a 2 large operation for that. We was just going out the door when the man said, I didn't think we could afford you because we only got $3,500 in the budget. At that time, we set the briefcase down, and that established the price of 2 Performance Rodeo back in 1953. Are we still all right? All right. I don't think anybody can hear me, and I think the commissioner kind of planned that. He's heard me at these board meetings when I had a lot of time talking,
Yeah, I mean, I've power.
Well, you got a battery. We do appreciate all the folks that have been connected with us over. Great, he's been in the rodeo business now for over 30 years. We have started a lot of young individuals, and a lot of them really come to the front. We're awful happy with all the folks that we have here from a long ways away. We have a cowboy family here from eastern Duluth, Minnesota. Coleman drove 20 hours to get here. We have people here from over in Houston. And in fact, I have 5 preacher friends here. And I really appreciate them. I don't know whether they think that I need a lot of help, or they think maybe in the near future there might be a job for one of them. I can tell them one thing, it'll be the one that works on the credit that's going to look the deal. I believe I probably said probably enough. I just want to thank everybody for being here this evening, this afternoon. It's really a great honor to go in with all these champions. I think we have 60 or 70 people here, and we're really proud of all of them. In closing, well, I would like to say, I guess I already have. I have to mention Jeannie Barnes, that's Marty's wife. She came with them last night. Mike McCarthy came with them. If it wasn't for those boys and also Mitzi, this rodeo business would be a lot tougher. Now, I am wondering what's going to happen. In fact, I think I can get off here, because HV is going to come up and he can talk without a microphone, I can guarantee you. But in closing, I would like to say that I do thank everybody for coming, and I thank all you folks for helping me get to the mountaintop in the rodeo business. God bless you all as he has me. Thank you.
Our next inductee will be Harry Vold, stock contractor. To make the introductions, Hal Littrell.
Commissioner, honorees, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's really a great special honor and pleasure for me to present for induction into the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame Mr. Harry Vold. And I especially am pleased that Monty Montana gave half my speech while he's up here. I also would like to have that M&M water that Monty has. I think there's several of us that would like to have that, Monty, and watching you perform last night at our rodeo. In fact, it looks like time for the Pack Speaker Bus Rodeo as we look at the sky back here and the speaker system falling out. So his life in rodeo started at a little pole corral arena in Asker, located 18 miles east of Ponoka, Alberta, Canada. Since then, the Harry Vold name has appeared at every major rodeo in the United States and Canada, where in 1992 he was inducted into the Canadian Hall of Fame. Harry Vold has been affiliated with the most prestigious rodeo stock contracting firms in the sport of rodeo, such as Butler Brothers of Elk City, Oklahoma, Harry Knight of Fowler, Colorado, and Christensen Brothers of Eugene, Oregon. Dave Acton of the Daddy of Them All Cheyenne Frontier Days wrote, "Harry is the most respected stock contractor in the rodeo business, and as a person, maybe in all of rodeo. He is always upfront and honest. Everyone looks to Harry for advice in solving problems in all areas of rodeo." The Harry Vold Rodeo produces 20 of the nation's top rodeos each year from his 25,000-acre ranch in Fowler, Colorado. For the past 24 years, since he went independent, has put together what most cowboy contestants and committees refer to as the best set of bucking stock in the business today. Harry's knowledge of bucking stock sets him alone in a different class and is verified by the number of his stock selected for the national finals each year. Bobby Joe, a product of Harry's successful bucking stock breeding program, was the saddle bronc champion in 1991, 1992, and in 1993. The Vold family believes in putting in a wholesome family entertainment and are constantly working to ensure that their rodeos maintain that reputation. They support the Cowboy chapter of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and hold cowboy worship services at all of their shows. Harry may have started at the business alone, but now has his entire family behind him. Wayne is a top contractor in Canada. Doug is always looking for and buying and selling bucking horses in Canada. Three of the daughters, Donna, Dorsey, and Nancy, also come when needed and help at their rodeos. And Dorsey's son, Harry's grandson, takes care of the keys for the Cadillac. That's an inside joke, if you know. Kirsten, a college student, travels in the summertime with the Vold family to all their rodeos and adds tremendously to the production and to the color of their rodeos and helps the family all summer long. And Karen, what a great lady. Everyone in the rodeo committees that has to deal with Harry Vold has to deal with Karen Vold sometime, and what a pleasure, a real pleasure that is. She plays a major role in working with the committees and putting on the finishing touches for the production. Karen, would you please stand up? Harry has been the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association Man of the Year and has been voted the PRCA Stock Contractor of the Year every year since 1987. What a great honor that must be for Harry. Mary Borgen of the Prescott Frontiers Days says Harry has seen their committee through all types of economic cycles, successes and disasters, and that he and Karen have been there every step of the way when needed, and they deserve much credit for the success of their rodeo. Gene Easton, president of Dodge City Roundup, says that Harry's integrity and loyalty to the rodeo committees, workers, contestants, announcers, and so on has always been above reproach, and that his contribution on exchange of ideas, cooperation, and suggestions helped Dodge City Roundup attain the Committee of the Year award for 8 years. Two-time world champion bareback rider Marvin Garrett was quoted recently in our local newspaper. When Harry Vold gets up in the morning, he looks in the mirror and he sees a cowboy. Bareback rope riding great Bruce Ford said, if anybody deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, it's Harry. I'll tell you this, he is a cowboy. And Ty Murray, 5-time all-around champion, when the rest of us are gone and people sit around and talk about rodeo, they will talk about Harry Vold. They, the crew at his ranch, affectionately called him Judge Watner, because of the many telephone calls he receives pertaining to settling disputes in the PRCA. Harry is one of the most honest and fair men I've known, relates Karen Vold, remembering when she was a trick riding some 30 years ago at Wainwright, Alberta, Canada. The show was rained out, and she learned later that Harry had paid the group out of his pocket. And she says in those 30 years he hasn't changed, and all of us that work with him on the rodeo committees know that he is the most fair, honest person that we have ever known. I've been in the banking business for 40 years and with a Pikes Peak or Bust rodeo for 40 years. And our committee members all have felt the same, that we have never seen a legal contract that is good as a handshake with Harry Vold. And yes, Harry Vold is a cowboy, and he has many other professional and ethical qualities that all of us can use as a standard and guide to follow. We offer our heartiest congratulations to Harry, to Karen, his family, and especially the selection committee for making such a wonderful choice. I'd like to give you Harry Vold, stock contractor for 7 consecutive years, going on number 8.
Plaque shall read, Harry Vold, stock contractor. Canadian-born Harry Vold is one of the only 2 stock contractors to provide animals for every national finals rodeo since its beginning. Vold, many times voted by his peers as stock contractor of the year, is known behind the chutes affectionately and respectfully as the Duke. Although Vold tried his hand at bareback and saddle bronc riding, he never had any ambition to be a full-time cowboy. His interest was in the horse business and auctioneering, then the rodeo business. His early exposure to the contracting business came with some of the greatest names in the business, Leo Kramer, Len Butler, and Harry Knight. Vold's breeding program, primarily with bucking horses, has led to 7 animals being voted top bucking stock of the year, 2 of which have been repeat winners. Over the years, Harry Vold stock has appeared at every major rodeo in the United States and several in Canada. Quote, my philosophy is to put on the very best quality rodeo with top stock and top cowboys. Wholesome family entertainment. Vold does that on a consistent basis as one of the most respected men in the industry. Born Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, January 29, 1924. Harry Vold, stock contractor.
Commissioner Cryer, honored guests, and those of you that have been inducted into the hall, I feel very grateful for this opportunity today to be here, and I'm going to try and beat this rain. First of all, I naturally want to thank my family for being here, because they've come here all the way from Canada, as far south is El Paso, Texas. That takes in a lot of territory, and they're all here with their families. I'm very, very grateful to them to take the time to come. And also the crew that we have that are putting on this rodeo. I'd like them all to stand. If they're here, I think they're back in there. The grooms, everybody, I want you to all stand. Because you're part of this, boys. Without you, we haven't really got anything to sell the public. We got to have all the good help, and I appreciate you for coming out. And we're going to try and beat this rain. All of these boys that have been inducted today, along with Barnes, have been at all of our rodeos, and I know them all very, very well. And I think so much of them, it's an honor for me to see them here and all their friends gathered together. It's a great day for me. And so many committees that are here, and I'm grateful to you for taking the time to drive up here and to be here. They're here from all over the country, and I do thank you so very, very much for that. There's a guy here today, I don't know if he's still here or not, that drove all the way from South Dakota, and he's partly responsible for me ever being in this business. He was Leo Kramer's right-hand man, and it's Shirley Hussey. Shirley, are you out there somewhere? If you are, there he is right down here. Thank you, Shirley, for coming and bringing Nora with you. Thank you very, very much. You know, I was just thinking when they were introducing the different contestants and then the Calgary Stampede, that's kind of where it all started with me, because I worked for them for a long time. And a lot of the people would never have known, but the Calgary Stampede had chuck wagons that come in with bucking horses, and that's the way it had to be. And I was one of those buckaroos that gathered around a chuck wagon with Winston Bruce's dad. And there were such guys as Sundown Morton, Shady Green, all the horse wranglers, brought in those bunches of horses with the chuck wagons. We'd hold them on Scotchman's Hill until 4 o'clock in the morning and then trail them down into the Calgary Stampede, and the only problem we would have would be the dogs. And I think of the Calgary Stampede, how great and how big it is, and I'm happy that you're here and that you were put into this hall. My brother drove here from Canada, or flew here I should say, and he was my partner for a long time, and I'm thankful to him and his wife Dell for taking the time to come down here. He didn't tell me he was coming, but I'm very happy that you came. I think the rain is about to hit, and I do thank all of you for coming. And there's one thing I'd like to say in closing, and that is that all of us in this rodeo business, from the rodeo committees, the sponsors, and all of us that are part of it, we have all enjoyed a certain amount of prosperity. But without the cowboy and the cowgirl that pay their own expenses to go up and down the road without any guarantee of any pay of any kind, without them, we would have nothing. There's nothing like the cowboy and the Cowboy Hall of Fame right over here. The cowboy deserves it. I'm all for the cowboy and the cowgirl. Thank you very much.
Could you all please stand? And in our closing today, we would like to ask that we would remove our head cover for just a moment in honor of one who could not be with us today, in recognition of Mr. Gene Ross. Gene Ross, Monty Montana, Barry Burke, JC Trujillo, Monty Henson, Bob Barnes, Harry Vold. Gentlemen, from this day forth, you will always be known as a Hall of Famer. Those are memories that are yours and have been shared with so many. But now you wear that title. No one can ever take it away from you, and we are so proud to so deem you today. We appreciate all of you being here. We thank you for your participation and your interest in these ceremonies. We would ask the inductees to come to the base of the Casey Tibbs bronze this morning so that we can get some group photos. We would also invite you all to join us for lunch, and we thank Original Coors for making that possible. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today.